Hey guys, how's it going? So today I thought I'd make a video on why watching the replays will make you much better at Overwatch. Because they're a valuable thing that a lot of people tend to just skip over, but they lead to a lot of insight and actually learning how to play the game and climb ranked. Um, so just if there's any new viewers, currently I'm GM4 in tank, Masters 2 in damage, and GM3 in support. I've been in GM on damage um, a few times, and I used to play on console as a top 500 on console. Um, but in general, I kind of have an insight on doing this. I've also done it for my esports team. We all go over the games, um, so I kind of know what to look out for a little bit. And provide a different insight. So in that case, if anybody wants to actually look over some games with me, they could just leave a comment, and I'll just let them know. I'll respond to it and just let them know where to contact me. And I'm free to do that. You just have to, wait till I'm free. But again, I'm down to do that anytime if anybody actually watches the video. Um, but regardless, so now we're going to talk about the actual, watching your replays, right? So to get to them, you would hit escape and go to career profile, right? Go to history and then replays, right? So we're going to go over a viewer that asked me to review their game. I already did this with them. But just I'm going to give you how I went over it and what you should look for and what I looked for while watching this. So that you can see it in your own gameplay, right? Um, so before we get into it, right, let me just, I'll go on to him, right? But first thing you want to do, right, is go to options, and then I scroll down here, time skip interval length. I make that 10 seconds. You can make it shorter or longer, but that's just how long, right? You could skip forward here 10 seconds, back 10 seconds. I think 10 is better. It's default on 20. I mean, you'd have to do this every time, but it's really easy to do. Um, and then you come down to the spectate player icon, and that's where you could click on who you want to watch. You'd want to watch yourself. So before we actually get into, me showing some parts of this VOD, I just want to talk to you about what you should do to benefit from watching your own videos, right? You kind of have to humble yourself, is the first tip, in that you have to understand that you're watching this to see what you did wrong, not what your team did wrong, not what anybody else did wrong. Or you're watching this to also see, like, for example, if you face a Smurf player, right? See how they played, see how they punished you and what they did to punish you a lot, what they did to roll your team, stuff like that. Um, how you engaged him versus he engaged you in a fight. So those are really big things that will help you drastically. Um, and the last one that you should really focus on is make sure you focus on what you could have done more, even if you won the game, right? There's always something you could do more, right? Even in my gameplay, if I watch it over, I comb through it too much. And you just realize all the stuff you could have done. And obviously, when you play, you're not going to be thinking like this, but it's good to understand the game a lot more deep to actually climb, right? So now let's get into the video. So some things I looked out for, right, was the starting character we picked on. You always kind of really want to start on the character you know how to play the best, especially if you have a lot more hours on one character. You really want to start on them if you're really comfortable on them, right? And then after you see their comp, you can make swaps if you have good characters to swap to. But you kind of want to see how it works with the character you've chosen. And then going into it, right, you want to see how you leave spawn, right? He used his mobility to get out of spawn. That's very good, right? But you also want to look, before you even leave spawn, what comp you have. So they're running a pretty good dive comp, pretty decent for a diamond. But dive is all about like kind of diving together. So then you'd go through and see if they actually do that. And I'm pretty sure they end up not really doing that. They end up playing really split, right? So let's look here. Doom's by himself, as most Doom players are, right? But his Zen's all the way back here still, which is okay because he's mobility. But you want to see if you're playing out of line of sight of your support, because that'll help a ton. You want to play in spots where you could see your support. And if you find yourself in your replays not doing that often, that's one of the things you could easily fix, right? One of the other things, I actually had another VOD review that'll be going up a little bit later in the week, is that you should focus on how fast you build your ult meter. Alright. See, he's already at 28%, and there's not even a point cap. So what's important about that is if you're building your ult meter pretty fast, that means you're probably doing a little better than average. But also, like, if you're building it at a moderate pace, that means you're doing okay, in my opinion. Um, so if you're building it really slow, which does end up happening in this game, that means you should probably swap. Um, and doing that, like that's a good way to judge if your character is really working or not. I mean, obviously, like, dying a lot also does that. Um, but that's just a good indicator, right? Another thing to look at is who you're focusing. A lot of the time, this player was focusing the tank, and I saw him doing that almost to a really large extent. And he was doing it to charge the railgun, which was fine. But then he would end up just shooting the tank with a railgun as well, a lot of the time. So, for example, on Sojourn, you kind of really want to focus that railgun on squishier targets that you could potentially kill, right? Sometimes I also noticed that he was not really aiming at supports that were just standing still and still shooting Maga just because of a tip he learned from a video. And while the tips are really good from any video you watch a lot of the time, they also are not one-dimensional, right? So you want to be able to have, like, everything is more situational in this game than most games. Okay. The next thing you should notice when you're watching replays is where you are with your team, right? Not just the supports, but where's your tank, right? He should not have been pushing without his tank here, especially onto a Mauga who's really strong right now. So that's another thing you could notice. These are very easy. The next thing, and one of the biggest ones, is using your ult really, like, way more often. The two people I've watched so far, they just don't use their ult. And as soon as I watched it with them, they noticed that and they started to use it a lot more, which was really helpful. But it's really hard to notice that if you don't go over your game or you hear somebody just say that to you. You just don't want to wait for the perfect time that never comes, is kind of what I like to say. So then moving on, right, you could see those are really the main points, right? But you could see how long you don't use ult. You could see, like, if you were focusing somebody instead of touching point at the last second, that's, you might still have lost, but it's always good to try and be able to get on that point at the last second if you're close to it, right? Because if the off chance somebody else could touch it, you could still win the game potentially, right? It's very rare, but it's happening multiple times, right? Then you want to look, like, was their Pharah getting a lot of damage here? I'm pretty sure she ended up not really doing a ton on Pharah, right? So that's good. But if the Pharah was, did you make that swap? Did you make that swap to a hit skin that hits her a little harder, right? Sojourn can do it, but were you the one doing that? If the game is fresh, try and focus on, like, if your comms were kind of decent, right? Like, if, did you ask your Ana maybe to swap? And obviously you don't want Ana to swap now because it's Sonic Yuriko meta, but in general, like, let's just say you had the Zen still, right? Did you ask the Zen to swap to Kiriko to cleanse Mauga, right? I mean, these are things you could ask, and you want to say it in a good way, right? In a nice way, like, hey, are you able to play Ana just because they're this and that? And if they say no, then, it is what it is. But if sometimes people throw if you ask them in a really not nice way, so try and be careful with that too. So going over your VODs, you just really want to watch where you're looking at, right? And then another thing is, I'd also recommend watching in your first person view, right? Because for a character like Sojourn or even like Widow, right? Any hit scan, any shot you miss is something that can be improved, right? Do you need to, like, really focus on hitting that railgun? On Sojourn especially, you do need to focus on that, right? Widow, did you miss a really easy shot? These are things that, like, are harder to fix unless you do, like, actual aim training, which I don't really do often. So I can't, like, really say it's good or bad for you. But people swear by it. But if you're really missing railguns, you have to really be like, damn, I didn't do what I need to do at this moment, right? And maybe you're getting a lot of kills because you're just shooting people, but you're not actually killing them, right? So Sojourn, like, knowing your character as well is a really big thing. Sojourn is a person that gets picks, not that just does flat damage. Like, she can do both, but she's really good at, like, really hurting people really fast, right? So she's going to burst you down. Are you getting those bursts a lot? Or are you just kind of shooting and then, maybe you had 30 kills, but, like, you only had, like, 2 final blows? And that's a lot worse than, maybe 20 kills, but, like, 20 final blows, right? Because it means you were doing a lot more. So these are all things you could check. There's a lot more settings you could do, right? You could click this free cam button. And you could just look around the map like this. It's a little weird to get used to at first, but I really recommend people go through these at least every once in a while, right? If you have a really good game, maybe you want to clip something, right? Something stupid like that. But it's also good to see like games that like you're like, oh, I don't know what I could have done better, right? Um, and that'll help you a lot more. So I hope this helped people. Again, I'm more than happy to help people look over their games with them because I could provide some different insight, like maybe like for example, the person that I went over with this, I saw they played really aggressive, and they were also saying they liked tank, but they didn't know how a character to play, and I recommended Queen. And he was telling me pretty recently that he went on like a 5 game win streak, right, and like went 4 or 5 in like 2. So he immediately found value in that character. So these are things like that I could provide that maybe you wouldn't think of at first, but if anybody actually watches this, just leave a comment and I'll send you a way to contact me. All right. Have a good day, guys.